Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we tell the truth about what's happening here in the Black community and we introduce great guests that have a lot to contribute to what we can learn. Tonight, we have a special guest, Mr. Thomas Barnett. Thomas Barnett has 28 plus years of experience as business consultant, facilitator, trainer, mentor, keynote speaker, and coach of transformation and change. His mission is to transform the thoughts and behaviors and ultimately the lives of those seeking to enhance their abilities in their professional or personal endeavors. Thomas is a leading facilitator or organizational change, leadership development, project management, change management, continuous improvement, cultural sensitivity, diversity and equity, belonging and inclusion, LGBTQ, IA plus, education and awareness, conflict resolution, communication skills, presentation skills, and lean enterprise. He is recognized for his work and influence resulting in effective collaborations and business success using his unique methods, the art of diplomacy and the art of influence and persuasion. Working with both corporate and individual clients, Thomas has significantly improved behaviors dealing with rapport building, positive engagement, increased productivity, elimination of production waste, empathy awareness, active listening, engaged questioning, emotional intelligence, and time management, and more. His breadth of experience touches many types of industries and disciplines, including manufacturing and distribution, healthcare, higher education, banking, sales and marketing, retail, call centers, federal and state and local governments, and technology. His individual clients range from corporate executives to medical doctors. Some of his engagements include Bayer Corporations, Facebook Meta, Farmers Insurance, General Electric, Kia Motors, University of Arizona, University of Chicago, U.S. Government Services Administration, and United Airlines. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you all to Mr. Thomas Barnett.
Hi, hello.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited.
Most definitely. So are we. So, is there anything you'd like to add to your bio or anything you want the audience to know before we get started?
Well, the only thing that I would add is I grew up in I'm from Georgia, born and raised, middle Georgia. As a matter of fact, Fort Valley is the city that I was born and raised in, Peach County to be exact. And I also have a music background. My mother was a music teacher and she had her master's in music education. And she and my three older sisters and I, one of the things that we were all required to do was sing, play the piano, and one other instrument to live in that house and go to church every Sunday and sing in the choir. So I grew up singing in many different church choirs because my mother actually played for three different churches. I used to sing in high school. So singing and performance is a huge part of my life. That's not in the resume that you have, but that's the only other thing that I would probably add. I grew up in the South. Singing and playing instruments and being a part of music has been a huge part of my life that I would be remiss not to mention at this time.
Well, I mean, that only goes to the family feelings of what your bio actually reads, because it shows and it demonstrates the closeness or the close knitness that you have in
Yeah.
connecting with people.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is something that came from my mother, who was, for all practical purposes, wasn't supposed to be the person that she ended up turning out to be growing up poor, black, on a farm in middle Georgia. My mother was actually born in 1928. So, yeah, she was 91 when she passed in 2020. So she lived a long, full life. But one day we had a conversation around how did you end up getting a master's degree, teaching, playing the piano for three different churches. And she said, well, that wasn't supposed to be the life that I had. And it was, through the grace of God and a lot of other people who saw something in Susie Pearl, that was her name, and said, you need to go to college, and there's more that you can do. And she ended up going to Fort Valley State. She graduated, and then she got married after graduation, which was also unheard of at that time. She didn't have my oldest sister until she was about 26 years old, and she was 39 when she had me. So she was different, and came up in the church and came up at a very different time. And I was able to reap the benefits of all of those things that she had as a blessing that may not have looked like a blessing all the time, but they turned out to be blessings, and that's what she gave to my sisters and I.
Well, I want to thank you for bringing that blessing to me and my guests, because I can see that this is going to be a really great show of learning experiences to learn from.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So, can you tell us, as a business coach, what strategies do you find most effective in helping organizations achieve their goals?
Well, the most important thing that I would say for any business is understanding what their mission and their vision and their values are. I think a lot of businesses create these statements. They have an idea, but when it comes to the everyday of running a business, they forget to incorporate their vision statement, their mission statement, and their values into the way that they're operating, both with their potential clients, but most importantly with the people that are working with them. I say working with them, not working for them. So anyone that is working within an organization, everything that you do should be a part of your values and what it is that that this could be the expanded vision of a company. So my biggest strategy is really getting them to understand what the words mean and how to take those words and put them into action. So that's the most important thing. Is a lot of times they don't realize that they have everything that they need, they just don't know how to put it together. And when
Mm,
businesses often grow too fast, they're not remembering those aspects as they're just trying to keep up with what's in front of them. And those aspects can get lost, especially when it comes to the asset of people. So I try to really focus on what they have and then bring tools to them to help them align their mission, their vision, and their values uh, into their everyday work. So getting them to remember who they are, which is really no different than a person when you think about it, because we're all people. And
right.
so that's the first strategy is, well, who are you? Who do you say you are? And now how do we get you to be that? It's three different lenses: how you see yourself as an organization, how you see yourself in the marketplace, and then how does the marketplace see you? So I try to close that gap with any business that I'm working
So, how do you find these clients, or how do they find you?
with. Isn't that the $1 million question everybody wants to know? It's so many different ways. I've been, as you mentioned, my background is actually in industrial engineering. So I had the pleasure and privilege of working with an industrial distribution company for 12 years right out of college when I graduated from Georgia Tech. Because of that, I was in a management training program, and it gave me an opportunity really early on to understand overall business, not just one aspect of business. So I didn't just work in industrial engineering. So it gave me a feel for accounting. It gave me a feel for marketing, for sales, for customer service and relationships with other businesses. And it also gave me an understanding of distribution and warehousing and how to keep track of inventory and developing software systems and so many other things that I probably wouldn't have had a chance to do, including human resources. I was a liaison at one time, recruiting for the management program when I was working there while I was in a managerial position at the same time. So having my abilities expanded, gave me an understanding of what businesses really need in order to succeed, especially when you have multiple locations, which we did. And then after 12 years, I said, I want to go into consulting and see what more I can do, both with businesses and with leaders, because leadership development and employee engagement is also a huge part of what I do. So how do I get clients? Well, I think the biggest thing is I have a lot of people that I've been connected to over the years. So networking is always important. And then showing up and doing great work with great clients who can then refer you to other clients. That's probably the biggest thing that I have leaned into is when I have something, lean into doing my absolute best on that project and then letting that speak for itself, getting referrals, getting testimonials of the work that you do, and then sharing that in your social media platforms so that people can see what you bring to the table. And the game has changed a lot. We have so much more access with social media, with LinkedIn and other sites that are like LinkedIn that are really intentionally trying to give you visibility, both as a larger corporation and as an independent. So it's really a great way for you to leverage that visibility so that people can see what you bring to the table.
So, could you share a specific success story where your coaching had a significant impact on a company's performance?
Yes. One, I will say that one instance in particular, really it had to do with coaching. It started this way. It started with me being brought in to help with an employee resource group that was struggling to be organized in their ability to get leaders to see what they needed. And it was the Black employee resource group for a particular organization. And they had several hundred members. And it was a matter of trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to set them up for success? And what ended up happening was it was a strategy of saying, how can we, around diversity, equity, and inclusion and access, give them an opportunity to get all of the things out that they needed in terms of what hadn't been going well, but at the same time, have a strategy of this is what we need in order for diversity to be celebrated and understood more here in this organization, or equity, or access, or inclusion. So, what I did was I ended up creating different groups. One group of 10 people that was going to talk to the president of this company about diversity, sharing one story of where they had not been celebrated around their diversity. Same thing with equity, same thing with inclusion, same thing with access. 10 people only, and we practice. But not only that, they work together to come up with what are the strategies that this individual needs to know so that we're not just venting about what doesn't work well, but what is it that we can give them to say, these are the things that we know that we need in order for this organization to have better success with DEI and access. So once those meetings were put together and the individuals had a chance to practice, and I gave them feedback on how delivery. A lot of them had never done anything like that before. When we had these individual meetings with the president, a 1 hour meeting over a month's time with each one of these different strategies, the president was so impressed with how it was delivered, how it made sense, it was understood. They were even given rules of engagement. This is for you to listen and take notes, not to guarantee anything. This is for you for the first time to really listen to what's being given to you. So, my job was to make sure that what was being delivered could be heard by this individual. Um, and it worked to the point of them saying, I want you to coach me too. So that
Wow.
turned into a coaching opportunity beyond those strategic sessions. Point of it is, all of it works together. I feel like a lot of companies want to take shortcuts when it comes to their success. it's a both and approach. There's so many things that work together if you give yourselves the opportunity, the organization the opportunity to lean into them. So not only did we have strategic sessions around what can we help other leaders understand around DEI, the leader said, help me be a better leader so that when I am being an ally for these individuals, I have the right understanding because I don't know what I don't know. And so having that vulnerability is extremely important too. So creating that space for the president to hear and not feel like finger pointing was happening, and for the people that were in the employee resource group to be set up for success so that they would go into this meeting with someone in that position and get them to actually hear them. So that's probably one of the most significant ones that really helped me understand how much more is required for the success, because it's all those things that make a difference, and companies have to be committed to that.
So did they wound up implementing the actual policy and the training that you gave them to going forward?
Well, a lot of it, they had a lot of things in place. So a lot of it was more of how can you get other leaders on board with the things that were already in place? Because
Mhm.
if they're not on board, then it just falls on deaf ears. I mean, people are doing the work, they're not believing in it. So a lot of it was to help with conversations with other leaders to to be on board with the things that were already in place, and
Okay.
because they already had a lot of great things. And that's where I go back to, sometimes companies don't know what they already have, and if something has not, they have to be patient, especially in the DEI realm. Anything really. I mean, if you're working on a project and it has a deadline, that's very different. But when it comes to culture change, when it comes to making something um, a part of the everyday, that's never ending. And it takes time to get it to a place where you actually start seeing the benefit of it.
Oh wow. See, I think this is where, when companies they reach out to learn something different and they really want to make that change. I think the things that you just described um would help to say that this company should, if over a period of time, should be a whole lot more successful than what they were already. Because if you're able to add the diversity in culture, you know, and it's real and it's authentic, then that's really going to make that company flourish.
It
And
is. And
these are skills we can talk about.
yes. And sustainability is such a huge part of it when it comes to that flourishing, that ability for them to be authentic, instead of it being something that feels like no one everyone isn't on board. And I'll say this, when it comes to anything, you have to have everyone on board. Any kind of vision, any if you have a vision and then you have alignment and then you have the execution of that vision, it all has to be, there has to be a buy-in for it, and it has to come from that place of, this is going to help the organization be better, it's going to help individuals be better, it's going to make people get to there's a word I use, thriving. You said flourish, thriving, same thing. That's what we're talking about, and we want to
Right.
do that in our everyday lives, and we want to do that at work. We don't want to go to work and be miserable. So how do we create an environment where people can thrive, where they can flourish? That's where companies actually get people to not only do their best work, but to show up excited and create an atmosphere where thriving is, you can feel it, you can tell it when you walk into the building. And I've
Mhm.
walked into places before where I could feel that excitement from everyone. It's not everybody is happy go lucky, but you could feel that everybody was happy or content or in a good place with their work. I've walked into places where you could feel it. It wasn't that. Looked miserable and it felt heavy. And
Oh,
all of that is real. It's very real. And so in today's world, especially with the younger generation and how they are moving into the workforce and they're going to become the leaders, we have to understand that their needs are different, and how they look at respect and dignity is much more independent and stronger within that independence, because we've taught them to be that way. So now we've got to match that.
mhm. What roles does mentorship play in fostering professional growth, especially within the community?
So mentoring is extremely important, I think, in everything that we do. I was just talking to a friend of mine about moving forward in they're moving into a different industry, and they were looking, they were trying to figure out how they were going to do it. They knew what they wanted to do, but all of the ins and outs they didn't understand about it. And I believe that mentors are extremely important for any person who is within an organization wanting to be visible or wanting to understand how to succeed, or someone wanting to start their own business. You need a mentor. The path has already been created. You can create your own identity within it, and do some things different for you, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And mentors really help you to find that understanding, be accountable. They are great at accountability, but they're also great at being able to give you insight into something that may be new for you. And so in the workplace, I think mentorship is completely underrated, and sometimes it's misunderstood, and people are put with people as mentors where maybe they are not the right fit for one another. And unfortunately, sometimes that gives people a bitter taste around mentorship because they weren't with the right person, or the person didn't understand the role of mentorship.
So, how do you approach diversity, equity, and inclusion in your coaching and training sessions?
Well, that's a broad question. I will say this: we're all diverse. We all Equity is something that is not always um, understood, but just understanding that we're all unique. Everybody has a unique quality. DEI is race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, but and it's also thinking, the way you communicate. It is a neurodiversity. Some people have um, the way that they understand the context of things when they're reading or talking is different. So it's so much more complex than a lot of the other aspects that we've talked about for so long, only because those are the ones where we have more of an underrepresentation, where it stands out. But it can be so much more nuanced than that. So what I say is everybody's unique. Everybody has a unique perspective. So it's about, are we getting all the information or not? Do we think we know everything? And if we do, then we're missing something. So I approach it by saying, what's your unique aspect? Who are you? What do you bring to the table that you know is different than everybody else? And what are we agreeing on, and what are we disagreeing on? And figuring all of that out is a part of DEI. So it's so much more complex. Again, broad question, but it depends on the context of how I'm working and who I'm working with.
Okay. And what advice would you give to aspiring facilitators who want to create positive change within organizations?
Well, I would say to a facilitator, mainly facilitate what is important to you. And what I mean by that is, a lot of facilitators work for organizations. You can create positive, well, I'll say this: some facilitators are contract, some facilitators work within organizations, and some of those organizations have both facilitators that are, employees, and facilitators that are contractors. I believe that it's really important, if you are a employee and a facilitator within an organization, that you're holding the organization accountable for true teaching, for true connection, for authentic, real, important things that people are going to be able to put into practice. There's so much that people, I think, forget when it comes to adult learning, that we try to include too many strategies or too many tools, and not everybody needs the same tool. So facilitators have to look at material and say, for these people in this department, this doesn't make any sense. Here's what makes sense for them. Don't overwhelm people. Give them something simple that they can put into practice. Good facilitation and good design of facilitated material does that. So the main thing I would say is facilitators lead with your heart, be authentic, know what works for the people in your organization, and get the design of material to be structured in a way that it makes sense for people to understand and put into practice. If people hear stuff and it means nothing, and they're like, there's too many examples of what to do, and they don't know what to do because of that. Because I've been in classes where it's like, we're going to give you another tool and another tool and another tool. And I'm like, this is too much, and I don't like any of it, and I don't know which one to use. So we're just going to tune it all out. Can we get this over with so I can get back to work? That's what ends up happening in a lot of these classes. So we need to pare that stuff down, give them practical application of how to do it and practice in the room, make people uncomfortable when you're facilitating, make them do it in front of you because that's how people learn. They don't learn from telling, they learn from doing. And facilitators need to remember it's more about them doing than you telling.
Wow, I like that. I like. I gotta have a follow for that though, because that kind of like goes back to as you explain that I mean perfectly explained, and I want to like intertwine that with the explanation though of the DEI. Like
Mhm.
when you're actually facilitating training, whatever you have to do when it comes to that. Have you found it to be difficult in most cultures in a lot of these businesses that you work with, where there's not a lot of equity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely difficult. And even today, we've been through a lot with affirmative action being struck down for colleges and for public universities. And so in some states, you can't even teach DEI if to universities. Texas is actually the one where you can't. And so it's one of those things where it has been um, sometimes it's easy when they get that it's not one thing. I think the issue is people think DEI is either a champion for some and exclusion of the others. And that's not the
Mm,
case. And
oh,
so it could be taught from that perspective, or even approached from that perspective, or even have a tone of that when that's not even how the material is written. But a facilitator who has dealt with negative emotion around their own identity, who is like, oh, I got to get these people today, if they go in with that attitude, they're going to alienate people that can actually become champions if they understood it includes them too. Because
mhm.
we're never going to be able to move the needle of DEI by not getting people on board who are on the fence or who don't understand it, but we can help them understand. That's where I've been able to go in and have opposition and change their mind before the class is over with. Because if I go into a situation where I know they've been struggling, my job is to create that space for them to understand you've misunderstood something, so I'm going to clear it up. Here's the truth of it, and here's how you can be a champion, a sponsor, a supporter, and be included in the process. So, yes, I have faced it. It's not always easy. Sometimes I've had people that are deterrents in the classroom, and you have to handle them, but handle them with respect and maintain your dignity, as my mother always said. So when you do that, because some people will make you feel like you want to jump out of your dignity, and you have to remember this is about your dignity and your respect. So stay in that place of dignity while you're being respectful back to them, because the one thing you don't want to do is pull other people out of that sense of understanding and learning because you've got one person who is acting up in a class. And I've definitely had that before.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. At the end of the day, diversity, equity, and inclusion does not have the word exclusion. So you can't create inclusion with the exclusion of some. It doesn't work. So that means we have to find a way to have conversations that allow people to be able to hear perspectives and understand them rather than negating them. I call it both and or yes and. Because two things can be true at the same time. Because you and I grew up in two different houses. We grew up in two different cities. We didn't have the same exact life. We have a lot of things in common. But you may say something that I may have a completely different perspective on. And so if I say but instead of yes and give you my perspective, you felt like I negated what you just said. Unfortunately, most conversations are had that way around DEI and a lot of things, but especially DEI. So I'm trying to help people have a different conversation when they are talking about perspectives that are different from their own.
Okay. Well, that that definitely makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that because that clears up a lot because I had a guest, maybe about a month ago that was actually breaking down DEI, and you and him are pretty much on the same plane with that. And it was like there's a lot of things that I think for the typical average individual that don't know DEI exists or know what it is, to hear that and then to learn, helps you to move forward with, maybe as you say, the forward thinking as to how to move and shake in situations. Because a lot of times a lot of us just don't know.
That is true. And unless you've been in that situation and had that experience, the first time it happens can be very jarring. And we are fight, flight, or freeze individuals. That amygdala is there for a reason. It's kept us alive as human beings. And so when you're faced with something where you feel like it's a threat, you're going to feel it. And being able to step back, pause, take a breath, breathe, realize this is not about you, it's about someone else's opinion or perspective that they've lived and they don't understand. There's a word that I think a lot of us probably don't necessarily always get exactly right. The word is empathy. And I say that because, what definition do we often hear of empathy? The ability to walk in somebody else's shoes. Well, what if their shoes don't fit? What if they're the wrong size? And I have been saying this for years. I can't walk in somebody else's shoes. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a black female, a white female. I don't know what it's like to be Asian. I don't know what it's like. Now, we may have some similar shared experiences, but most of it is I'm not in their skin. So I can't walk in their shoes. So what we're talking about are feelings and emotions. So when we have people where their perspective is different and they have a feeling around it, can we identify with the feeling? If we can identify with the feeling, then that's where we start building the bridge of understanding, even if we didn't share that experience before, that perspective, or even if we had the same one and we have a different feeling. So then we can have dialogue around the feelings. And I think that's where we actually have to start building more of an understanding when it comes to DEI in and of itself. Is the empathy part of it for all of us is, what did you experience? What did you feel? I know what that feels like. Talk about that.
In your experience, how can leaders effectively communicate during times of organizational change?
I think part of it is ensuring that there is transparency in communication and leadership during organizational change. Change is going to happen. Change has to happen in order for businesses to stay afloat, for organizations to transform. It's interesting. There's a difference. A lot of people think of change and transformation as being the same, but they're a little bit different. Um, Sometimes changing can be, changing an idea or just changing a direction of something that you're doing. But transformation is even more so. And a lot of organizations actually need to make transformations rather than just change, because change may or may not be sustainable, but transformation is. You come to the other side of it. And so when you are going through anything like that, I think leaders have to be transparent, they have to be authentic. And I also believe that leaders have to take a very unique approach to communication. They have to realize that people are wanting to buy in. Some people's personalities are afraid of change. Some people embrace change. So you have to know the people that you're leading and what where they are in that understanding of change or comfort, and be able to meet them where they are.
Mm.
I remember when I was working for the first company I worked for, McMaster Car Supply Company, we changed all the time because when I started, there were only 20 employees or 30 employees, and it grew to hundreds before I left. So we were constantly changing. Systems was changing, were changing. We were adding more and more products to our inventory. A lot of things were happening inside the office and out in the warehouse. And so change was constantly happening. Creating a system to where people know about it ahead of time, they're prepared for it. You've got a system in place for how people learn what the new change is going to be. They get to practice it so that when it happens, they're not caught off guard. Because people's biggest fear around change is that it's going to cause them to fail. And
Mm.
failure at work means you're affecting their livelihood.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you can get over that fear with them by meeting them where they are, this person doesn't like change, this person does, creating a system so that change in and of itself, and it does, there are change models for that reason, but you follow it. That's what helps leaders be more effective.
What motivates you to continue mentoring others after 28 years in this field?
Huh. My passion is people, what is their purpose, and the process to achieve that purpose. Now, that could be for many things. Individual coaching, group coaching, facilitating, keynote speaking, I don't singing, whatever. What motivates me to not just be a mentor, but to be an impact with people is we all we have. And I feel like we haven't been getting it right for such a very long time. And and I believe that God has put us on this earth to understand what unconditional love for another human being truly is, and I think we're failing. And so my the one thing I'm trying to do the most is to close that gap with people, getting them to be comfortable with who they are, being one with their own spirit, and then allowing that to be how they put themselves out into the world. Because if you connect to yourself, then you can connect to other people. So in my mentoring, in my coaching, in anything that I'm doing, I'm always trying to say, how can I help people be a better version of themselves individually so that that can allow them to then connect with other people and make stronger connections overall.
Wow. I gotta tell you, you are definitely an impactful person. Don't ever let anybody tell you anything. You're really impactful because I mean, a lot of this is it's more than just logic. It's the way I look at it. It's more than just logic, but it's like when you want to be better and you want to treat people the way you want to be treated, these are some of the things that actually, I think go back to when you say when you was a kid, how you was raised. Those
Mhm.
are values that were instilled in you. So it's like it's something that's just natural and innate. But it seems like a lot of this has like dissipated. It's gone somewhere. Why do you think that's so?
Well, I think a lot of it, well, there's so many different reasons. Social media, number one, reality television.
Let's blame that.
Reality TV, just acting up for no reason and getting away with it and getting paid a little bit for it and getting fame for it. You know,
Okay.
it has changed. It's there's more than that, obviously, but I think we have so much at our disposal right now. There's so much information, so much we can see the world fast. We can see around the world instantly. I mean, you can follow people that are in other countries on any social media platform and know exactly what they're doing all the time. So we have information that's coming to us much faster. We have visibility much faster. We have we've had generations now where the reality of life has been exposed in a way to now it's scripted. It's not even real. So we've got this mixture in our brain, and unfortunately for a lot of young people, that's all they know. And
Mhm.
so when they are perceiving themselves through the eyes of other people, they're not necessarily looking at themselves and understanding who they are for their own value and own worth, because everything around them has been shown to them. This is who you should be, and how quickly it is for people to start developing a sense of identity based on what's outside of them rather than what's on the inside of them. So
Mhm.
I think that part of it has been because of that self identification and that truth of who you are without any other noise. We're not developing that for people. And for us that are older, we start to fall into that trap. We're not the same. We're different too. And patience to be a better version of yourself. You said know better so you can do better. And when you do better, you will be better. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that. We're not
Mhm.
knowing better.
Mhm.
So that's where I think a lot of it has to do with people really getting into the essence of who they are, unifying people to themselves first, which then gives them the respect for themselves and dignity so they can hold that for other people too.
Mhm. So, how do you address unconscious bias in your coaching and training programs?
Well, the main thing about that is we all have them. If you're alive in this world and you've been living, you have unconscious biases. Some of them may be unconscious, some of them may be conscious. We have biases. So
Mhm.
I say drive around in Atlanta traffic, you will uncover some of your unconscious biases. They will come out.
Ooh, ain't that
I
the
tell
truth? Ain't
I
that the
tell
truth?
I tell people in my class all the time, if I am struggling with my unconscious biases coming out is when I'm driving around in traffic in Atlanta, Georgia, and they all get it anywhere. So we all have them. That's the thing. We can't look at unconscious biases and say that they're all bad either. Again, going back to fight, flight, or freeze. Well, when you
Mhm.
have a repeated message that you've seen over and over and over again, that message becomes ingrained in your brain, and our brain likes patterns.
Mhm.
Patterns is what keeps us alive. Case in point, you've had a long day at work, you work in an office,
Mhm.
you get in your car, and all you want to do is relax, get some air flowing, and get home. But do you think about how you're driving home the entire time? Are you thinking about the day you just had? Your car gets home, but you're not conscious the entire time you're driving, meaning you're not thinking about every turn and everything. Your brain just knows what to do and how to do it. You're not even thinking. Well, that's unconscious. It's
Mhm.
conscious but unconscious.
Okay,
And so if
okay.
we have an experience where over and over, or we were taught something over and over, or we heard it from our parents over and over again, sayings that our parents would say, teachers, ministers, community leaders, things that we've seen and heard over and over again become a part of our unconscious biases. That doesn't make all of them bad, but it doesn't make all of them right or true. That's every living being in the world. I address it by saying we all have them. The key is, where are they getting in the way of my ability to see more with people who are different? So if I see a group of black guys walking down the street, what do I think first? And why do I think that? Or do I look at them and say, oh, that's just a group of these guys or that guys? Or do I see something that's going to be a threat first? It all is a matter of what you're used to seeing. So
Mhm.
not all of it is true, but you have to catch it. But we all have them. We all have them. I could look at a white guy getting on the plane and he's approaching me, and I think, oh, this is going to be a terrible ride. I don't want him to sit next to me. And my brain is like, keep walking, Jack. But then they sit next to me and turns out to be an incredible conversation. And that happens every time. But that doesn't mean that my unconscious bias doesn't immediately say, keep walking.
Right.
That's how I address it, truthfully.
What leadership skills do you emphasize when working with clients?
Again, a broad question. I think here's where I go to the individual. There's so many there's so many things that people are that you need to be good at as a leader. But the difference is not every person is the same. I really like to have people take personality assessment, profile assessments, specifically DISC, because I really like how, for leaders especially, it shows them what is their tendency, both in their natural state and when they're under stress. So for me, the leadership skills depend on where you're lacking. Because if I'm trying to teach you how to be a better leader or give you tools, if I'm just repeating what you already are good at, that doesn't do you any good. So it depends on the individual. Where are their gaps? I just had a coaching session today where the leader took a disc profile and they saw where they had gaps, and all they could do was laugh because they kept saying, "Oh my gosh, this is so true. I am." They're very fast paced, they don't like details, and now they were starting to understand why they have conflict with some of their other team members, because some of their team members like to go slow and this individual likes to go fast. They never understood that before. So it was closing the gap of what they thought in their mind. I'm going to go back to three things: how you see yourself, how you see other people, and how other people see you. As a leader, you have to have that full circle in order to be a great leader. But you have to know what you're great at, what you're not great at, and then start closing that gap. Then you need to know, well, how is your team? What are the people like on your team? What do they need? Meet them with what they need, not with what I want to give them. A great leader understands each person is different. So I give the leaders as a coach what they need in order to meet their team's needs.
Okay. Could you share an example of a successful continuous improvement initiative you've led?
Yes, you're asking all these questions are so different from each other. That's interesting. Um, continuous improvement in a lot of ways, it's a manufacturing term. Kaizen is the actual Kaizen. Kai means to break apart. Zen means to make better. Like if you think about the Buddhist, um, you think about people being Zen. Zen is to make it better. Kai in Japanese actually means to break it apart. So continuous improvement is looking at anything that isn't working and breaking it apart, looking at where you have the issues, and then rebuilding something that's even better. Or it's taking what you have and making improvement to it. Either way, because sometimes things are good, it's just that one piece of it may not be working effectively, or you're not implementing something right in order to do that. In a manufacturing environment, you're always making continuous improvement. So you're looking at how people are working, you're looking at the flow of the work, and you're saying, how can, and sometimes they're just projects that we're working on to make a process better. So that happens all the time. So from that perspective, it's always happening. And in fact, that's part of why the Japanese have been the leaders in the automotive industry for so long, is because they were the first ones to put continuous improvement into their processes and into their way of managing their processes. It was something created by an American. And the top three automotive industries back in the 70s were like, that's too much. We don't want to do all that. And this individual went to Japan with it, with Toyota, and then they implemented it. So continuous improvement is really around that idea of how can we continue to be a better version of what we've been doing in our operation. But I'm going to give you continuous improvement from individual. I've worked with several people as a coach who, over the period of years, were learning how to be better speakers, to interview in front of people that could give them $100,000 just by talking, or $50,000. And a lot of it was around just how do you connect to the best of yourself know who you are, and learn the skill of communication, the art of communication in a way that you can inspire people, you can make them believe in your message, and you can make them believe in your ability to have an impact. That takes time. And the work that people have put into that ability to learn how to communicate effectively, the art of diplomacy, the I call it, that ability to influence, impact, persuade, and give people something that is really going to be important for them. That's the where continuous improvement for me in individuals that I hold most dear. When it comes to just manufacturing processes or putting something in place, that part of continuous improvement is project based. And to be quite frank, it's easy. It's not as exciting. But for me, it comes with individuals putting into practice and holding that gain of their ability to be a better version of themselves. And then years later, I get a message back from them. I'm about to interview for a job within my organization, and I haven't interviewed in 10 years, but all I keep hearing is you in my head giving me all those coaching tips that we went through for years and years and years. And literally, they get the job every time. I can give you 10 examples of that. That's the continuous improvement that I hold more dear because it was very individually based.
Mm. So let me kind of like jump a little bit over here to the left. Can you tell us, like, with all of the skills and the things that you bring to your clients, um do you get the opportunity to do any of this work, or do any workshops or seminars within your community where you can train people on just things for the betterment of their lives?
I have not I haven't done it. Well, I will say I did do a seminar last year that I created myself, and it was for women, and it was on women's leadership, really looking at how we can start elevating that conversation and really helping women to and helping men, really helping men to understand that with 50% of the population being women, that only a third of them being in key leadership positions, especially Fortune 500 CEO positions, that we've got to do better and how to bridge that gap. But it is one of the things that with my company that I am planning to do is to really create that space for the community to really have a place to learn, to grow. I've been asked to be on a board to help support an initiative like that. I actually will be going to Victories, which is a men's group in Chicago that does work to help underprivileged men, and it's a mixture of all different kinds of men in this group. And I'm actually doing a talk on the binaries of manhood in September with this particular group in Chicago, which is a community-based group in the Chicago area. So I'm moving more into that because I know that there is a need for us to elevate each other and elevate these conversations and these skill sets because I think that's part of the issue with going back to why are we not as, I don't know, respectful or cordial or however you phrased the question earlier. I think part of it is people, it's not, I'll say it's an identity that's been forged in a lot of things outside of people, but also giving them an understanding of ways that they can connect to themselves that will make them feel more empowered from that essence of themselves rather than it being from something outside of them. So those skills and those tools are a huge part of the work that I will continue to do so that people can really build themselves from the inside out. And I think you're right. Uh, Doing more of that in the community is something that I've been working on over the last year.
What impact do you believe mentorship has on community development?
Well, I think that's part of especially in the Black community, we've got to, we are now, I think we're just now starting to see where we need to have that be a part of our, let me rephrase that. We've been trying to do it for years. We get on it and then we fall off of it. We don't sustain it. Community centers falter, and that happens I mean, that happens. But I think we're seeing that as a community, there are There's power in our ability to sustain one another that we've not been allowed or understood the power of. When you look at other races that are doing very well within their own communities or supporting their communities, I just saw something the other day where the dollar in the black community only circulates for like 3 days. Where is it? One day? Is it one day? Is it one day? One day? And in
Yes,
others, it's like
five and
15
six
days or
times.
28 days, like
Yeah.
so much longer, so much longer. Okay. So we've got to change that. We've got to change that in order for our communities to really start to see the level of success that we've earned. We've earned it. We've earned it. We just haven't been able to sustain it. We tried and they burned it down in several times in several places.
Mhm.
So now we've got to do it again. We've got to do it again, but this time I think there's so much more at stake, and I believe we have a better chance now of being able to do it.
Yeah, I hope that we can get better with that because we're late to the party. And as you said, I mean, there are an enormous amount of people now that recognize this situation because if we're running away from our communities that are being gentrified and they're not being built up, how are
Yeah,
we going to go back and put the resources there when it's already taken?
yeah,
Which means you've lost twice.
yeah, exactly. And I think we have to. So what we have to, where I try to close the gap in people's minds is when I think because there's an exhaustion that Black people feel in this country, and at the same time that doesn't mean we still have to do the work. We were pulled apart. We were pulled apart from the idea that we should even do this. We were kept from it. Whereas when other groups were coming here, they were forced in solidarity to kind of stay together. Whereas we were pulled apart intentionally and kept like not necessarily uh, in a place to where we could feel that sense of empowerment as a community. And then when we did do it again, they burned it down. We know that. So that in and of itself sent messages. Don't even try. And so we've had generations of black people where knowing that it wasn't like we didn't try. We just it didn't have the same concerted effort that a lot of other races have. Like when you look at the Asian community, especially in California, but even here. I mean, there are places. You have Chinatown. You have that sense of they are supporting one another strongly, and so we've just never been able to hold it because we kept being pulled away from it. So now that we have this opportunity, I think in this window of time to create it and sustain it, we've got to be thinking about it. Pharrell has been mentioning it. If you've heard him talk about it too, this is something that we've got to do. We've got to do.
How do you balance individual coaching needs with organizational goals?
Are you speaking of individual coaching within the organization? Like if I coach a CEO and what the organization is looking for?
Yes.
So that goes back to that example of where I was helping the Black Employee Resource Group and then ended up coaching the president of the organization. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to give
Yeah.
away
We don't
the
want to.
coaching information,
Yeah.
but that's exactly in alignment. Here's the interesting thing of that is the coaching of the leadership individually is aligning them with the organizational goals. They don't a lot of them don't know what they don't know. And they don't know that they are not aligned in how they're leading their teams. So actually, one of the things that I love doing is helping coaches. It's interesting. People are not easily vulnerable when they have been in top positions. Admitting they don't know what they don't know in a safe space takes a lot. That's where the coaching gets them to start realizing you're not that great at everything. And how can I help you? How can I help you? Or how can you partner with another person who is in your organization who you two can balance off of each other? and find accountability and safety. It's not very easy for people to admit that they're not great at everything. And coaching gives them that space to feel vulnerable enough to understand it and then work towards it rather than not doing it at all. That directly aligns them to the overall organizational goals.
This question, I really wanted this to be my first question because I think
Okay.
this is the best question in the world.
Okay.
What inspired you to focus on knowledge management in your work?
Well, I will say when you think about people, I think it's really important for us to operate from, well, there's two things: facts, critical thinking. I think that I know that those two things get people aren't given the opportunity to truly understand what critical thinking is, because we can see that in just in our politics, in misinformation, in so much that's being put out that's not true until people think, and then they do the actual real research and they find the truth. And there is or they find the facts, I should say, because I'm going to tell you, there is a difference between truth and facts. You have your truth, I have my truth, but the facts are the facts, and those are undeniable. It's
Yeah.
like numbers and math. Well, there is a fact in everything, but a truth can be your truth or my truth.
Mhm.
And that's where we have to have critical thinking to find out the difference between truth and fact. So when you're dealing with people and managing systems and processes and creating strategies and change management, or looking at a vision and then how you're going to align people with it, and then how you're going to execute it, then how you're going to sustain it, you've got to operate from fact. That's what's going to give you the best outcome. It doesn't mean there isn't a place for truth, but the more you have critical thinking to drill down to get the facts, the better the outcomes are going to be.
Mhm.
So that's what I believe when it comes to anything that's knowledge based and being able to manage anything, people especially, but processes too. You've got to be able to have those two things. And so that's where my focus comes in.
So let me just tell you the premise of that question is because uh, you know, uh, you know, it's like just think about, you say you've got the 28 plus years of experience that you have at doing what you do, and what you've done actually is I call it that's like high level stuff. Okay, that's the real deal. And I think just from that perspective, I'm just thinking, so this is where most likely this has to help me, is that one, we know now that with society changing like it has, people are susceptible now to believe a lie before they believe the truth. And so we've got mainstream media, we've got social media that's putting out lies and they know it's lies.
Hmm.
Nobody's being held accountable for that. But
Hmm.
it's played so many times over and over and over again that for some people, I guess you say, when they just worn down about it, it's like, well, this must be the truth. And so I had to catch myself because one time I had to ask somebody was talking about something that was a lie. And I wanted
Hmm.
to say so bad, how big of a fucking idiot can you be? Why do you think that this is happening like this? Because it's like reverse psychology or reverse something. I don't know what it is. Like being in a bizarro world.
Well, yeah. So, and I'll add to what you said, AI is going to make it even more challenging because we won't know what's the truth and what's not the truth. Right now, I saw an ad and I'm listening to this man and I'm looking at his face. I'm like, this is not your face. And I was like, oh, great AI ad. I put it in. I replied. It wasn't even anybody I knew. I was like, but it was so ridiculous. And it was just like, ugh. So that's where critical thinking skills come into play. It really, I'm going to say this: I try to be a glass half full person. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but at the same time, I know, and I say but that time, I know that we're going to have our discernment between what we're seeing and understanding get better, get stronger, because they can take a person's image and create something from that person's image that the person never did.
Mhm,
So I think that there is going to have to be some accountability with laws in place
mhm,
for there to be people signing off on their image. And if you break that law, there are repercussions. It's like anything else, intellectual property or anything where you've got your image and you own it, but somebody else is using it. You can sue. You should be able to sue them if it's social media. We haven't created that, but we've got to. We've tried to hold off on it. We're going to move it. We won't have a choice. And so this whole social media printing or having videos with lies, that's going to have to go away. I believe that freedom comes with responsibility. And the freedom of the press does not mean the freedom to print lies. It doesn't give you the freedom to say things that aren't true and to make them up and to sway people with propaganda that is not based on any facts other than somebody sat down and decided they wanted to put this out there into the world. And
mhm.
so I believe that we have to start holding, you mentioned it earlier, accountability for this misinformation. And especially with AI, I don't see how we're not going to be able to do it because it's so much more advanced.
Mhm.
And it's going to come down to you. They're already making videos with celebrities. Where they're changing what they do, and yeah, we've seen some. We're gonna leave the names out, but we've seen some where they've changed and out changed the whole interview. It's like that's not what happened,
I
and
don't
you
know.
know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes, because there was a show I did earlier where there are some people that need to be held accountable, and they know who they are. They
Yeah.
know who they are.
And we just
But
don't have anything in place for that now. And I believe that for me, that's where I would want to see some kind of regulation come into play. Because I believe that if we don't do it, that's the biggest fear for the younger generation and for anyone who gets exhausted from it all to just believe what they see without thinking anything more of it. And unfortunately, we are also starting to see the foundation of information shifting to the lie or misinformation. So when you Google something and you read about it, it's not correct. I
mhm,
saw that recently. It was incorrect information. It wasn't exact.
mhm.
And that is happening because where do you find the truth now? Because it's layered underneath all of this crap.
So then this is where, like, let's just say in this situation, like, with some of the main organizations that you deal with, some of the higher up larger organizations that you deal with, and I'm sure that this very same thing is there. I'm sure of it. And so it's like, have you ever had the situation where you had to correct that, or did you just leave that part out of what you do as work?
No, I mean people in all kinds of classes, people bring up things. It
Mhm.
could be a communication one-on-one session. It could be problem-solving tools. It could be making teams work. Why do teams in conflict? Anything where life is involved in people. The ideas around conflict and conflict resolution and conversation. It comes up not just in DEI, but in all of that.
Right.
Yes, I have. It's one of those things where, fortunately, in the work that I do and a lot of the places where I work and I teach these concepts, critical thinking is an aspect that's brought up early on, and asking the class what is critical thinking and having a definition and having them understand it from more, because some of them don't really have an understanding of it. What I lean into, thank goodness, in a lot of these is okay. You've read something or you've heard something. You've chosen to believe that it's true. You know that when you read things on social media rather than looking them up on Google or any other site, social media is going to give you the rabbit hole. It's designed that way. So if you look for the thing that you're looking for, it's going to show you more of the same thing, whether it's true or not. Where did you get that information? What was your source? What did it say? Now, let's look at how that could might be a different view somewhere else. Did you think about that not being true because it aligned with what you wanted to believe in that moment? Where do you think the opposite of it exists? And they'll say, yeah, probably. Where do you think you're going to find that? And so I go through that conversation with them to try and help them understand that there could be a different opinion. So I use the yes and approach because, again, the yes and or the both and means two things are true at the same time. It doesn't mean that both of them are factual. It means that's what I said earlier. That means that they're both true at the same time. Where did you get your truth? One is based on fact and one is based on conjecture or lies. So then we have to get them to see where the truth is, where the facts are, so they can alter that. But you're not going to get it just by telling them. So I help them do that discovery.
What steps can organizations take to create a more inclusive culture?
Yeah, these are broad questions. the, the, every organization is different. So you have to really meet them where they are. I think the biggest mistake that we made after Mr. George Floyd was murdered and all of the people around the world saw what black men actually have been talking about going through in this country as a real event, as a real something real, and sharing our stories of, yeah, I've been pulled over for no reason in somewhere because the car I drive or where I was. I've had it happen to me and sharing those stories. I get to that because I say that because when Mr. George Floyd was murdered, I believe that a lot of companies wanted to do the right thing, but they didn't know how and they didn't know how far they needed to go. So they checked the box. They just did something and checked the box and kept going. Well, that just made the people who were already upset pissed off, and the people who felt like, yeah, we had diversity training, like, okay, let's keep going. But that doesn't change anything. Sustainability with inclusion requires a transformation in your mindset, in your heart, and in your culture and your behavior. When you know better, you'll do better. When you do better, you will be better, meaning your beingness, how you are every day, will be better. You're not going to get there by checking a box. So it depends on where the organization is, and it's a journey. It's not a one stop shop. Not everything fits every organization. And if you're trying to give every organization the same kind of class, that's crap. They don't they each need something different. Now, some of the ideas may be the same, but how you approach it needs to be the way the organization needs. And they have to commit. If organizations don't commit to multiple trainings for every employee to understand that you are a part of inclusion, that belonging and thriving is every employee's right. And if you have a Black business resource group, invite people of other races to come and listen so they understand what Black people go through. So they're not just guessing, and then maybe they can share where I feel like this or I feel like that because of, I'm a new person, or I live in a different part of town and I don't feel like, some of the people I work with live in this area and I feel like I don't mix well with them. Those things happen at work, and it actually is a part of the inclusion factor. So inclusion is so much more than just the things that we focused on. So we've got to broaden it to get everybody into the idea of inclusion so that everybody can feel like they're part of the solution and not everybody is included right now in that process. That's why it's not working.
How do you approach leadership development in diverse teams?
Well, first of all, that's the beauty of diverse teams is being diverse. I think that that's actually where you find your strongest teams is when you have a diverse team is actually the most The best high functioning teams are diverse teams, period. So
Mhm.
if you have a diverse team, truly diverse, that's key. As a leader, I go back to then you have to know each individual on the team. You cannot lead a diverse team exactly the same. You've got to know what's the unique quality about Charles, what's the unique quality about Thomas, what's the unique quality about Joseph, what's the unique quality about Mary, what does Mary need, what does Michael need, what does Stephanie need. They're all different. None of them are the same. So if you try to blanket lead people, you will fail. But if you find out what these individuals need, because they're of their unique talent, ability, or the way they process information, the way they learn, the way they hear, the way they communicate, as a leader, you've got to be able to navigate all of that. And that's why you're making the big bucks. So leaders need to be able to meet each team member where they are. Once they do that, then you get the best out of all of them. And that's how you make a diverse team high functioning.
Mm. What communication strategies do you recommend for effective organizational change management?
These are in-depth questions that are not that easy. They're not easy questions. These questions are questions that I would be answering after putting a presentation together for a company, depending on what they need.
Oh,
Communication effectiveness is key, but it's also very unique to what is the organization missing. Um, Repeat the question again because it's a very broad question.
what communication strategies do you recommend for effective organizational change management?
A lot of it has to do with where the organization is. I'm not going to give you all my strategies for free. This is where the money comes in.
Oh, just overview.
But I will say that when you think about change management and you think about communication, you have to first establish what are the forms of communication that an organization has. Where might they have communication gaps and breakdowns? When you are dealing with change management, you're looking at maybe an audit within the organization, depending on its size, to understand what channels of communication they have. I go back to the telephone game. You can have 10 people sit around the room and pass information, and it's going to change by the time it gets back to you. That's how people think and they process. So you have to understand what is the process and what is or isn't working before you can give them strategies. All of it really depends on what they need and how it's going to help them. So an audit is the first thing I do. You got to really do an audit and say, where are your communication channels? How are they being used? Who's disseminating this information? Where might there be some, and take a poll of people that are getting the information, meaning, do you feel like you're being given transparency? Is it clear whenever communication is being given to you? What are the hybrids of different ways that communication is coming to people? Is it through their computer? Is it on their phones? Is it on their um, laptops or their iPads or whatever they may have? Because a lot of companies use different things, and so a lot of it depends on an audit. A lot of it depends on taking the pulse or a poll or surveys of individuals, and then looking at where they have their gaps and then creating strategies to help them fill in those gaps or to make change where they think one thing is happening and then what's the reality of what's happening. So a lot of the strategies depend on where are the gaps. What are they
Mhm.
where don't they know they have gaps and how do you start to fill those in? What makes sense for that organization?
Okay. Well, let's this actually what I'm going to do is because I think the rest of these are in-depth questions, and I want to ask you, um, can we have you back on the show?
Absolutely.
I would definitely appreciate
Absolutely.
that. And is there As we're going to close, after that question, is there anything you want to leave to our audience that you want them to know, how some of these organizations may be able to contact you and so forth? Is there anything you want to leave?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I have really, really enjoyed it. I think that at the end of the day, um, I would always want people to know that you're people first. Um, Someone mentioned earlier about corrupt organizations and upper management. I can't change the entire world in one swoop, but I can change individuals one person at a time or groups of individuals at a time. You have to start somewhere. As someone said to me a long time ago, you got to start somewhere. So give each other grace in the process of getting better, because again, better never stops. My mother said, you can always get better. Nothing happens overnight, and sustainability takes work and practice. So we have to be patient in the process of giving ourselves and other people grace. That's the only way we're going to get better. And that's the only way we're going to be able to hold the gains, as I say. Hold the gains. If we make gains, how do we hold them? We remember, we practice, we don't let things fall by the wayside. We keep being vigilant in what we want to see be the difference that we are living. We want to live it, we want to feel it. We have to remember that.
Mhm.
Stress makes us do all kinds of things. We're inundated with a lot of information. A lot of it isn't necessarily good. So I'm very mindful about what it is that I let myself uh, see and hear and believe and fall into, and I keep moving forward in positivity as much as I can. So grace is the best thing that I can say. Give it to yourself, give it to other people. Be discerning at the same time. Don't give people what they don't deserve, but at the same time, give them respect and hold your dignity in the process. So that's the main thing that I would say. It's a lot.
And so what if there's some organizations that are watching?
Yes.
How can they contact you?
Yes. So they can contact me by, they can reach, my name is listed here, Thomas Barnett. That's my full name. They can reach me at thomas@thomasbarnett.com. Very easy. Just make sure there's an E at the end of Barnett. Thomas@thomasbarnett.com or info@thomasbarnett.com. Both of those come directly to me. And I am revamping my brand. So if they join me on LinkedIn, you just look up Thomas Barnett. There's a big, pretty picture of me smiling, so you can't miss it. Same name. And I will be on that page announcing the business name and the rebranding, so people can see all of that. But LinkedIn is a great way, or they can email me directly at thomas@thomasbarnett.com.
Well, I'd like to thank Thomas for giving us some of his time and those wonderful, wonderful coaching and teaching moments that he gave us. I'd like to thank each and every individual that watched us tonight, and those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel. I would love it if you would please hit the subscription button, hit the notifications button that's underneath. So each and every show that we do, you will get a notification that it's done. In case you do miss the show, you can go back and you can watch it anytime you'd like. Again, I'd like to thank you all for spending some time with us tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Barnett again for giving us a lot of knowledge for what we all should need and use in life. And as he said, he would be back on the show again. So there's more information that we'll be able to understand. And for those of you that are continuously watching the show, please remember to tune in tomorrow. Instead of 6 tomorrow, we will be on at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. So please tune in tomorrow and watch the wonderful show that we have. Thank you again for your time, and you all have a great evening.